The harsh realities of slavery in ancient Greece. Imagine a life where every breath is a struggle, every sunrise brings another day of back-breaking labor, and the crack of a whip is the only music that fills your ears. This wasn't a scene from a medieval torture chamber, but the everyday reality for countless souls trapped in the brutal system of slavery that thrived in ancient Greece. Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today we're diving into a side of ancient Greece that's often overlooked, the harsh realities of slavery. But before we delve into the harsh realities of this system, let's pause for a thought experiment. We all know war and debt led to slavery in ancient Greece, but there's another shocking third source. What unexpected group of people could end up enslaved? Stay tuned to the end to know the shocking answer. So where did these slaves come from? It wasn't just a matter of bad luck. Greece's constant warfare with neighboring states meant a steady supply of prisoners of war becoming slaves. Imagine entire villages, families ripped apart, condemned to a life of servitude. But conquest wasn't the only source. Debt could also land you in chains. Fall behind on your payments, and creditors might just take you and your family as property. Piracy was another cruel twist. Raiders snatched people from their homes along the coast, selling them on the open market like livestock. Even the most innocent weren't spared. In some cases, girls were abandoned and often ended up in the slave markets. And for the truly unfortunate, even childhood offered no guarantee of liberty. Unwanted babies were sometimes left exposed, condemned to a life of servitude if they survived. It's a harsh reality, but it paints a clear picture. For many in ancient Greece, freedom wasn't a right, it was a privilege. But how did the Greeks justify this system? Well, a big part of it stemmed from their view of the world. Greeks considered themselves superior to anyone they called barbarians, anyone outside their culture. These barbarians were seen as naturally fit for slavery, their defeat in battle a sign of their inferiority. Slaves themselves were often dehumanized. They weren't seen as individuals, but as possessions, tools to be used and discarded as the master saw fit. It was a brutal ideology that fueled a brutal system. But next, we delve deeper into the daily lives of these enslaved people and just how harsh that reality could be. Now, being a slave in Greece wasn't a one-size-fits-all situation. Your fate largely depended on where you ended up. Some toiled in the scorching sun, backs bent double as they tilled vast agricultural estates. Others found themselves crammed into workshops, hammering away at metal or weaving intricate fabrics. Some, the lucky few perhaps, landed in domestic roles. They might serve as cooks, cleaners, even tutors for the children of wealthy families. Skilled slaves like doctors or musicians could fetch a higher price and enjoy slightly more freedom. Numbers are hard to pin down, but estimates suggest that slaves could make up anywhere from one-third to even half the population in some Greek city-states. That's a staggering number of people whose lives were defined by serving others. But numbers can't capture the true human cost. To understand that, we need to step into the daily grind, the relentless toil, the ever-present fear that defined the existence of a slave in ancient Greece. So stick around and get ready for a story that's as brutal as well as important. Now imagine waking up before dawn, the ache of exhaustion clinging to your bones like a second skin. This was the norm for slaves in ancient Greece. Cramped quarters, often shared with entire families, offered little respite. A meager breakfast of barley gruel or watery soup would fuel their day. Tasks varied depending on your skill set. In the fields under the scorching sun, they'd toil from sunrise to sunset, planting, weeding, harvesting. A back-breaking routine that never seemed to end. Mines offered a different kind of hell. Here, darkness and constant danger were their companions as they chipped away at rock, lungs filled with dust, with the ever-present threat of cave-ins or collapsing tunnels. The lucky ones, perhaps, found themselves in domestic serving. While still grueling, these roles might offer slightly better living conditions and a glimpse into the lives of their masters. Skilled slaves like doctors or artisans could even earn a small amount of money, sometimes buying their freedom or that of a loved one. But for the vast majority, life was a relentless cycle of work, exhaustion, and fear. Brutal overseers ensured compliance with the sting of a whip. Evenings brought no solace, just a return to those cramped quarters, the constant reminder of your place at the bottom of Greek society. The physical hardships were only part of the story. Imagine living in constant fear. A misplaced word, a slow step, anything could bring down the wrath of their overseer. The crack of the whip was a constant reminder of their powerlessness. Families were often torn apart, sold to different masters. The emotional toll of such separation must have been immense. Slaves had no control over their lives, their bodies, their very identities. They were property to be bought, sold, or even discarded at will. The psychological toll of this existence must have been horrific. Depression, despair, a constant yearning for a freedom that seemed like a distant dream. These were likely the unseen companions of countless slaves. Life as a slave in ancient Greece was a terrifying existence. Any hint of disobedience, any perceived slight, could bring down a storm of punishment that went far beyond a simple beating. Masters had complete control over their slaves' lives and bodies. They could brand them with hot irons, a permanent mark of ownership that was a constant humiliation. Slaves could be confined in brutal leg irons or stocks, rendering them immobile and completely at the mercy of their master. Some even faced the ultimate indignity of being rented out for gladiatorial combat, forced to fight to the death for the entertainment of others. Masters wielded a nightmarish arsenal to keep their slaves compliant. Some punishments were designed to inflict excruciating pain. Slaves might be hung by the wrists for hours, their limbs dislocated and screaming in agony. Others faced the brutal torture of the peg-legged torture, where their legs were bent backwards at the knee and secured in painful contorted positions. The agonizing practice of phylactery was common, where the soles of their feet were repeatedly beaten with a heavy rod, shattering bones and leaving them writhing in pain. And for the most serious offenses, execution could be the final chilling consequence. But even death could be a horrific spectacle. Crucifixion, a horrific punishment borrowed from the Persians, left slaves to die a slow, agonizing death from exposure and dehydration. And for those with skills deemed valuable, the threat of mutilation loomed large. A skilled blacksmith who dared to rebel might find his hands crippled, rendering him useless. A talented doctor who spoke out of turn could face the removal of his tongue, silencing his dissent forever. The cruelty of these punishments wasn't just about inflicting pain, it was about sending a message of absolute control, a message that any defiance would be met with a fate worse than death. Masters used these horrific tactics to break the spirit of their slaves, to create a climate of fear so profound that even the thought of resistance seemed unbearable. This culture of fear was undeniably effective, but even in the face of such barbarity, the human spirit yearned for freedom. Now we'll explore these acts of defiance, from small acts of sabotage to full-blown revolts. So don't go anywhere, because next we'll see the fight for freedom that burned bright in the hearts of some enslaved people in ancient Greece. Humans have an incredible capacity for resilience, a yearning for freedom that even the most oppressive system can't entirely extinguish. Slaves in ancient Greece did not passively accept their fate. Some slaves chose flight, running away. A desperate gamble offered a chance, however slim, at a life of freedom. Others engaged in acts of sabotage, subtly damaging tools or crops, a small act of defiance that could disrupt their master's operations. The most daring act of resistance was rebellion. Groups of slaves banding together would rise up against their owners. These revolts were fueled by a desperate yearning for liberty, a chance to break the chains that bound them. One of the most famous examples is Spartacus' revolt in Roman Italy. Though geographically outside our focus on Greece, it highlights the potential for large-scale slave uprisings. Spartacus, a gladiator himself, a former slave, led a rebellion that terrified the Roman Republic for years. But these rebellions were rarely successful. The power imbalance was simply too vast. Masters had access to superweaponry and the backing of the state. Most slave revolts were brutally crushed, leaving behind a trail of death and even harsher punishments. While these uprisings may not have achieved lasting change, they were powerful testaments to the enduring human desire for freedom. They showed that even the most downtrodden could rise up and fight for what they believed in. All right, let's recap. We've delved into the dark underbelly of ancient Greece, the brutal system of slavery that underpinned much of their society. We saw how slaves came from conquered populations, debt, piracy, and even abandoned children. Their lives were defined by back-breaking labor, cramped living conditions, and the constant threat of violence. Now, it's important to acknowledge that slavery wasn't just some moral failing of the ancient
Người Hy
Greeks. It
Lạp đã
played a
đóng một vai
crucial
trò
role in
quan
their
trọng trong nền
economy.
kinh tế của họ.
Slaves provided the labor for agriculture, construction, mining, and domestic service. They were the engine that kept the Greek world running. But understanding the economic benefits doesn't erase the human cost. The suffering, the loss of freedom, the psychological toll, these are the true stains on the legacy of ancient Greece. Now, here's the question we posed earlier. What was the unexpected group of people that ended up being enslaved other than the war and debt? The answer is truly shocking: abandoned children. Even children were not spared from confronting this harsh reality. Understanding the realities of slavery in ancient Greece forces us to confront this uncomfortable truth. Thanks for watching this look at the harsh reality of slavery in ancient Greece. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for more content that explores the hidden stories of history. Until next time, take care.